Hey guys, my name is Mo Fami. This is my first of sharing with you this crazy story. I was reliving some old memories tonight and remembered this weird experience I had as a little kid. I want to know if anyone else has experienced something similar to this. I put this under paranormal, but I'm not sure where this should actually fall. Feel free to make suggestions, please. Anyway, I am currently 24 years old, and this happened years ago when I was maybe 8 or 9. A bit of backstory. I have always been very adventurous and spent a lot of my free time with my best friend. My best friend was running around the neighborhood with me and playing in the woods, searching for creatures, snakes, frogs, rare bugs, etc. I also did a lot of fishing at this pond by my house, maybe 1 mile from my house. Also to note, I lived in a very wooded area. My house was situated in a clearing, and while there were neighbors around, there was thick woods towards the back of my house that went on for miles. Now, on to the story. This one day in particular, my friend wasn't able to come over, but I didn't want to waste the beautiful day, so I decided to go into the woods to the pond to do some fishing. It was a bright sunny day, and I was ready to go catch some bass. My parents gave me a lot of freedom, and didn't really care where I was as long as I was back before dinner. I never wore a watch, so I just used the position of the sun to determine the time. I get to the pond and everything is great. I caught a bunch of fish to bring home. Throughout my day, I periodically looked up in the sky to gauge when I'd need to head back. I looked up at a particular time and remember being happy that I still had a few hours left before dinner. I decide to sit down on the side of the pond and fish while sitting and relax a bit. This is when things got strange. I should mention that one of my neighbor's house is situated right on this pond. Essentially, the back of their house faces the pond and is about 200 feet away from the edge. They always let me use the pond whenever I wanted and always came outside to say hi and to make sure I'm okay. Well, I found it odd that after being there for so long, they didn't come out. Maybe they weren't home. Anyway, I began to realize that I was out in the woods, all alone with no one around. This didn't alarm me, but I was now aware of that fact. I dismissed it and kept fishing. About an hour later, I noticed that a breeze started. These weren't strong gusts, but enough to ruffle the trees and suppress sound. I started to get the feeling that I was being watched, even though I knew I was alone. I wasn't scared at this point, but starting to get a bit weirded out. As these gusts came and went, I began to hear a faint voice that sounded like my mom's coming from the direction of my house. It sounded annoyed, and I was like, crap, I better get home. I was kind of relieved since I was starting to get a bit freaked. I quickly packed my gear and headed out. Since the voice sounded annoyed, me still thinking that it was my mom, I decided to take a shortcut home, rather than my usual route through the woods. This shortcut involved a dirt road with numerous houses on it, but this road directly connected to my street and brought me home in a more direct way. The breeze blew and I started to rush towards the exit of the woods to the dirt road. I felt much safer once I could see other houses and no longer felt that I was being watched. I rushed home. I could still hear the voice calling to me, getting louder as I drew closer to my house. Once I got there, I left my gear outside and walked in the door expecting my parents to be mad at me for something. My mom was right in the kitchen and smiled and said, "Wow, home early today?" To which I responded, "Weren't you calling me to come home?" She looked puzzled for a second and said I was probably just hearing things. I remember being weirded out for a second, but didn't really give it that much thought after. I went back outside and gutted the fish and brought the flesh into the house to clean and grill. That was the end of that, or so I thought. Fast forward to about a week later. It was a warm summer night, so my windows were open. My mom went away on business, and it was just my dad, my brother, and I in the house. I'm fast asleep, and am woken up suddenly by what sounded like my dad's voice calling to me from outside. I looked at my clock on my nightstand, and it was just past midnight. I thought it was very strange that my dad was outside, but I was still half asleep. I'm calling Dad, all the way down the stairs. I don't get a response, and in my delirious state, I put my shoes on and go outside, still calling out for my dad. I'm now outside and still calling for my dad, but don't hear anything, so I begin wandering around my yard, calling for him. Finally, I hear him calling my name from the woods. Without thinking about it, I start walking towards the woods, calling out for my dad. Calling out. I'm now outside and still calling for my dad, but don't hear anything, so I begin wandering around my yard, calling for him. Finally, I hear him calling my name from the woods. Without thinking about it, I start walking towards the woods, calling out for my dad. As I'm about 50 feet from the tree line, I hear a voice booming back from my house. "Op WTF are you doing?" I look back to see a flashlight and my dad walking towards me. He had heard me calling his name in the yard. His windows were open as well, and he must have heard me. I ran over to my dad and he was like, "What is wrong with you? Why were you walking towards the woods?" To which I replied, "I heard you calling me." "Oh, I get it now. You were probably just sleepwalking, it happens. Now go back inside and get to bed." I went back to bed and that was that. My dad gave me a little bit of a hard time when I woke up the next morning. Something along the lines of, "Some night you had last night, huh?" And that was the last we ever spoke about it. Recently I've been lurking in this sub and have read some similar stories which made me have a flashback and think of this one. Any ideas on what this could have been? It could totally have just been a dream/me sleepwalking, but I remember it unfolding, even though I was half asleep. The other part I find strange is that I had two separate accounts of hearing voices calling my name in such a short span of time. My childlike brain never put two and two together that they were related, but now I'm convinced they could be. I haven't had anything even remotely close to this happen since then. Just thought I'd share since I think this community would appreciate it. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more of my stories.